Our first story comes from a man we'll call David. He and his wife had just moved into a nice, quiet suburban neighborhood. The houses were close, but not too close. Their next-door neighbors were an older couple, Helen and Frank. They seemed friendly, if not a little odd. They were always in their garden, always watching. They'd bring over cookies, but they'd also linger a little too long at the door, their eyes wandering into David's living room. The strange things started small. A screwdriver from David's garage workbench would go missing. A day later, he'd see Frank using an identical one in his own yard. David's wife, Mia, couldn't find her favorite pair of gardening shears. A week later, they were sitting on Helen's patio table, rusting in the rain. David wrote it off. "They're just old and forgetful," he told Mia. "Maybe they borrow things and forget to return them." But it kept happening. A book, a patio chair cushion, a bag of charcoal. It was never anything big, but it was constant. It felt invasive. Then David came home from work early one Tuesday. As he pulled into his driveway, he saw Helen quickly walking from his side gate back to her own house. She was carrying something small and white. David didn't think much of it until he went inside. Mia was in the kitchen, her face pale. "What's wrong?" David asked. I think I'm going crazy," she whispered. "My pregnancy test, the one I took this morning. I left it on the bathroom counter. I just went back to throw it away, and it's gone." David felt a cold chill. The small white object in Helen's hand. He ran to the side gate and looked over. In Helen's backyard, next to her rose bushes, was a small, neat compost pile, and sticking out of the top of the fresh soil was the clear, white plastic stick of a pregnancy test. That night, David and Mia lay in bed, unable to sleep. They heard their backyard motion sensor light click on. They crept to the window. Frank was in their yard, standing perfectly still by their patio. He wasn't taking anything. He was just looking, as if he was checking on something that belonged to him. The light turned off, leaving Frank in darkness. They heard his back door slide shut a moment later. They moved out 3 weeks later. They didn't give a reason to the neighbors. On their last day, as the moving truck pulled away, David looked back. Helen and Frank were standing on their porch, waving slowly, and in Helen's other hand, she was holding Mia's missing gardening shears, waving those too. They weren't just borrowing things, they were collecting pieces of their lives, and David and Mia realized they had no idea what the couple wanted to collect next. This story comes from a woman named Chloe. She lived in the upper unit of a duplex. The lower unit had been empty for months until a man named Leo moved in. He was the perfect tenant, quiet, polite, kept to himself. He'd give a shy nod when they passed in the shared driveway. Chloe felt lucky. The first sign something was wrong was the smell. A faint, sour smell, like spoiled milk and damp earth, that started seeping up through the floorboards of her bathroom. It was strongest at night. Chloe mentioned it to Leo once, awkwardly. He just smiled, a tight, thin smile, and said, "Old pipes, sorry." But the smell got worse. Then came the sounds, not loud noises, subtle ones. The low, constant hum of a freezer from below her bedroom, a hum that would sometimes stop for days, then start again in the middle of the night. And the scratching, a soft, persistent scratching in the walls. She thought it was rats and called the landlord. When the landlord investigated Leo's unit, he found nothing. Leo was apologetic, charming even. "It must be the trees outside," he suggested. Chloe started to feel watched. She'd close her blinds, only to find them slightly open later. Small things in her apartment would be moved. Her toothbrush handle would be facing the wrong way. The cans in her cupboard would be rearranged. One sleepless night, the humming from below stopped abruptly. The silence felt heavier than the noise. Then, she heard it. A new sound. A soft, wet, dragging sound from Leo's side of the shared basement. followed by the distinct click-scrape of a large bolt being locked. Fear finally overrode her politeness. The next day, while Leo was at work, Chloe went to the shared basement. It was dark, full of old junk. Leo's section was cordoned off with a heavy-duty latch and a new, strong padlock on a heavy chain. But the old wooden door had warped with age. There was a gap at the bottom, about an inch tall. Driven by a dread she couldn't explain, Chloe got on her knees. The sour smell was overwhelming here. She pressed her eye to the gap, peering into Leo's locked storage space. It was mostly dark, but a sliver of light from a basement window fell across the concrete floor, and on that floor she saw a trail, a glistening, wet trail, like something thick and heavy had been dragged from the center of the room to the far wall. And at the end of that trail, just visible in the shadows, was a large, industrial freezer. Its door was sealed shut with heavy-duty duct tape wrapped around and around the lid. Chloe never called the police. What would she say? That her quiet neighbor had a messy freezer and a bad smell? She broke her lease and left within the week. She never found out what was in that freezer. But sometimes, in her new apartment, when everything is quiet, she thinks she hears that low, familiar hum. And she wonders if Leo ever found a new perfect tenant, living right above his collection. Our final story is from a couple, Ryan and Sophie, who moved into a tight-knit community with a very active neighborhood watch. The captain of the watch was their direct next-door neighbor, a man named Gerald. Gerald was intense. He knew everything about everyone. He'd point out that Ryan's trash can was 3 inches too far onto the sidewalk, or that Sophie's car was parked slightly over the line. It felt overbearing, but they figured he was just dedicated. Then the notes started appearing, slipped under their front door, typed anonymous. The first one read, "Your living room blinds are open after dark. You're a target." Another, "The package on your porch was unattended for 22 minutes. Dangerous." They confronted Gerald. He denied it, but his eyes gleamed. "The watch is for your safety," he said. "We have to be vigilant. You never know who's really living among us." The notes became more personal. "Sophie, the red shirt looks nice on you." "Ryan, hope your job interview went well today." They were being watched every second. They installed cameras. The morning after, the cameras were mysteriously turned off. Another note. "Cheap tech. Easy to jam. You need a professional." That night, they heard a soft tap, tap, tap on their bedroom window. On the glass was a single sticky note. It just said, "I am the professional." Terrified, they decided to pack a bag and leave for a hotel. As Ryan loaded the car, he saw Gerald standing in his own doorway across the lawn, silhouetted by the light inside. Gerald wasn't holding a note. He was holding a pair of wire cutters. He gave a slow, single wave. They sped off. At the hotel, Sophie checked her email. There was one new message from an anonymous sender. The subject line was their hotel name and room number. The body of the email was empty except for a single attachment, a screenshot from their own living room camera, taken the night before it was disabled. It showed them sleeping on the couch. The timestamp was 3:17 a.m. The camera had been working. Someone was inside their feed. Someone had been watching from inside their own home. They never went back. They sold the house from a distance. The realtor told them the new buyers were lovely. A friendly older gentleman and his wife. He'd been so helpful during the viewing, pointing out all the security features of the property. He even volunteered to be the new captain of the neighborhood watch.